In today's video, we're going to carry on with ARK Invest and we're going to discuss 3 of their ETFs: the next generation internet, genomic revolution, and fintech innovation. Over the past few days, I've explained my plans to invest into all 5 of the ARK Invest ETFs, and in yesterday's video, which I will link in the description below, we invested into the ARK Innovation and the autonomous tech and robotics, but today we'll be focusing on the bottom 3 here. Just before we dive into today's video, as always, if you're new around here, it would be brilliant if you consider subscribing to the channel, as we're just 29 subscribers away from our next goal of 600. And with all that being said, let's dive right into today's video. Firstly, as I've mentioned in yesterday's video, that you cannot actually invest into the ARK ETFs completely automatically on Trading 212. So for that purpose, we have to invest manually into each of these 5 ETFs, and my plan is to rebalance and to buy and sell in the shares that ARK are buying and selling every Monday. But one handy tool to do so is you can actually get a notification from ARK every day if you sign up to the newsletter. So for example, on the 6th here, we can see for yesterday, we can see the buys and sells in all of their ARK ETFs, which is kind of handy as well when you're rebalancing your own portfolios. There's 3 ETFs to get through in today's video, and as all this information is quite easily available on the ARK website, we're only going to discuss this briefly before jumping over to my Trading 212. So let's start with the ARK Next Generation ETF, ticker symbol ARKW, with 2.4 billion in fund AUM. And when you scroll down below, we can also see the sector weightings for this, and it's no surprise, given that this ETF is basically sold around technology. IT is their highest weighting here with 38.9%, followed by communication services and consumer discretionary. In terms of the ETF's top 10 holdings, we can see on the left here that Tesla, Roku, and Square make up the top 3, and their top 10 holdings overall make up 44.3% of the weighting. You can also see the fund performance here, which has been very impressive over the last year. We can see here that the ARKW ETF over the last year has went up an incredible 123%, which is absolutely insane for an ETF. Just before I show this ETF on Trading 212, just a quick note and pointer for yourself if you want to actually look into these companies or ETFs in more detail. When you go onto the ARK website and you scroll down to their ETF section, you can see here that for each of the ETFs, they have a very extensive list of information, everywhere from the fact sheet to, let's say, their fund holdings per day. So if you do want to copy them, like me, for example, and you want to do it on a weekly basis, then you click into the fund holdings CSV here to see the adjustments for the weightings and what companies they bought and sold every day. We then have stuff like the fund performance for the month end, annual reports, semi-annual reports, quarterly, etc. So there's a lot of information readily at hand. So here we have my next generation ETF, ticker symbol ARKW. The top 25 holdings I've picked here, just because if we pick, let's say, the top all 50 companies in this ETF, it'd be quite time consuming updating this every week. But you can see also that we looked earlier that the top 20 or even 10 companies for that matter make up the majority of the weightings, so it's quite fine to have 25 of the companies here. It's also worth noting as well that when creating your own pie, that for example some of the companies won't be there on the list that are on these ETFs and Trading 212, so you just need to adjust accordingly and maybe just pick the company below that. So for example, if you want to pick the top 25 and let's say company 5 and 6 isn't there, then just pick company 26 and 27 also. Also, when you're doing the weightings, for example, you need to adjust these because you don't have all 50 companies, you have about 25 of them. So in Tesla's example, that was about 7 or 8% on the ARK Generation Internet, Next Generation Internet. But because we don't have all 50 companies, these target weightings will jump up even more. So it's about 11% when you do the calculation, which is quite simple to do. At the moment, we can see here that we're down 0.3% or just 59 cents. But that's usually the case when you're buying into funds at the very beginning. And we only bought into these last night, just before the markets closed. So it'll really take about, let's say, a week, 2 at the minimum to see kind of how these ETFs are actually performing. You can also see here that the top holdings within this ETF are Tesla, Roku, Square, Teladoc, Facebook, and Netflix make up the top few companies. The next ETF that we'll discuss briefly is the ARK Genomic Revolution ETF, ticker symbol ARKG, with 2.3 billion in fund AUM. In terms of weightings, the top 2 holdings here First of all, the healthcare takes up the vast majority of the sector weighting, which is no surprise, making up a massive 95.9% of the overall sector weighting. And you can see here on the left that the thematic elements, the top three are molecular diagnostics with 23.5%, beyond DNA and gene therapy make up the top three thematic elements. On terms of the market capitalization front, the majority of these companies would be in the large or medium style companies and also in the small, with the mega and micro taking up the least amount in the market capitalization. Again, you can see the top 10 holdings here. Invita, CRISPR and Pacific Biosciences make up the top three weightings on this list right here. And then we look over at Trading 212 briefly to see how the fund is performing, even though it's only a few hours old. We are pretty much break even on Trading 212 so far. In this company, we're up about 12 cents. And in this ARKG ETF, the top holdings again that I mentioned, we can see here the top few. But it is also worth noting that this again will take a while to actually start to work. Even if you invest in the S&P 500 at the same time as you invested in this ETF, you would realize that they wouldn't have moved at all, if anything. So you can see here, we're only up at 0.07%. It takes time and patience before these style ETFs start to increase. And also over time, I'm going to start evenly distributing money into each of the 5 of these ETFs as well. Mainly when there's no opportunities, let's say in my normal main ETF here, my Now or Never Finance ETF, which is up 11.1%. When there's no opportunities here, the dollar cost average, I would then be putting my capital into these style ETFs then. And the third and final ETF that I want to discuss today briefly is the ARK Fintech Innovation ETF, ticker symbol ARKF, with fund AUM of 674 million, which is a bit less than the other ETFs. In terms of sector weightings, we can see that the IT and communication services and financials make up the top 3 companies here. I'm kind of surprised that the financial isn't a small bit higher, but obviously because IT is the way forward in terms of fintech, it's no surprise, I guess, that it makes up about 40% of the weighting here. And then also when you scroll down, we can see that the majority of the companies would be in the large cap market capitalization. Also, you can see over the last year, it's gone up a massive 86.2%, this ETF alone, which is very impressive. And you can see on the left, the top holdings are Squire, Mercantlibre, and Zillow Group make up the top 3 weightings, but Squire definitely are the top here by far with 12.3%. So we now have all 5 ARK ETFs invested in, and we can see that overall now my overall fund value is €5,944, and overall we're up about 9.1%, so I'm quite happy with that. Again, even though let's say 3 of the 5 of these ARK ETFs are currently in the red, that's no surprise, to be honest, because initially when you invest into a company at the start, it nearly automatically goes into the red straight away because you're buying at the best price possible at that time, but the markets move straight away. So for that reason, I'm going to wait about a week or two to let's see how these are starting to perform. And if they start to perform in the green, then we're going to start pumping more money in to see where these can end up over time. And who knows, even in months to come, if these ETFs start to either underperform or if I believe they're getting really overvalued, then I can simply start cutting money out and pumping it into my main overall ETF here, which is kind of the bread and butter of this channel as such, the Now or Never Finance, as this will be one of the main factors here to get into my €100,000 invested overall. And overall now we're nearly 6% of the way there, so I'm quite happy with that. And the next goal is to get €10,000 overall invested into the market to get 10% of the way towards my overall goal. So that kind of brings the end to today's video, guys. If you found it any way helpful or entertaining, it would be brilliant if you consider liking the video, and especially comment below on your thoughts and views on ARK Invest. I'd be very interested to know your views and opinions on that. Also, it'd be brilliant if you consider subscribing to the channel if you're new around here, as would really help the channel out also. And finally, it'd be brilliant as well if you comment below if you have any questions or queries, or if you want me to cover any specific kind of video, and I can certainly try to do so. Thanks very much, guys, and I'll see y'all in tomorrow's video.